Hello, true duelists. YGO Strats here, embracing my desire to be a YouTuber by doing what all great YouTubers do, reacting to someone else's content instead of making my own. Yes, that's right, today I'm taking a look at the Actman video. I have tried thrice thus far to make this video and failed each time, and thought, it's been too long, we're gonna move on from it. And then I saw one of the MBT clip channels post a video of a reaction to it, and it got some solid views, and I was like, well, they're probably just watching it for MBT, but if there's still interest, I'm gonna try and milk it. I failed like 6 times doing the conventional react. I'm just gonna do my usual green screen nonsense, and you can let me know the formatting of this video and whether or not you'd like to see something similar in the future. In the meantime, let's get into it. What made Yu-Gi-Oh! So awesome, and what happened to it? I paid for the rum, I hate the rum, and now I will drink my fucking rum.
Despite my rose-tinted glasses, I can't deny that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is both the dumbest and coolest card game ever made.
Now, there's always a level of trepidation whenever I watch something made by a non-Yu-Gi-Oh! Player about Yu-Gi-Oh! There's plenty to critique, there's plenty to make fun of, there's plenty to enjoy, but in general, whenever a Yu-Gi boomer covers the subject, there's always the same tired things over and over again. And I guess I'll get this out of the way real quick. Yu-Gi boomer is kind of a weird term in that it isn't quite as defined as one might think it is. Because sometimes you'll hear someone say like, oh yeah, I'm a Yu-Gi boomer. I've been playing since 2010. And it's like, no, I'm a Yu-Gi boomer. I've been playing since '02. And so it's just in referring to like, I've been playing this game for a long time and I'm a boomer of this community. But in other times, it's kind of just the equivalent to Pokemon's Gen 1ers. And I'm just gonna go on a real quick tirade here. I fucking hate Gen 1ers and their equivalents in, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! As that version of Yu-Gi Boomer. This notion that only the earliest and first thing is the one that's good and worth looking at or trying. The idea that because you were interested in it at one point and it fell out of interest for you, that everything subsequently is bad because it did not pertain to you specifically. I fucking hate that. It is prevalent as hell in Pokemon specifically, with the whole like, they ran out of ideas after Gen 1, they should have stopped. It's just an ice cream cone, that's so dumb. And it's like, you know, it's a little fucking goofy. I'm not gonna argue that Vanillite and its line is a wee bit really, it's a lottle bit goofy. But to that, I have to ask any Gen 1er out there to just name your one favorite Pokemon. It's probably from the first 151. That's cool. That's fine. You can be a fan of Kanto. So just tell me it. What is your single one Pokemon that's your favorite? And now tell me whether or not it is 6 individual bouncing eggs. These 6 wholly separate eggs, each with their own eyes and presumable brain that you've seen in the show, operate independently of each other. There's 6 wholly separate eggs bouncing around. Is that your favorite Pokemon? What if we take the scribbles you drew on the wall as a disruptive little shit when you were a child, and we give it a pair of googly eyes and some red Timberlands and call it Tangela? Is that your favorite Pokemon? Learn to shut the fuck up. God, I hate Gen 1ers so goddamn much. I'm talking about them way too much in this video about Yu-Gi-Oh, but it is to the point, there's a point to this. The Yu-Gi-Oh equivalents are just as fucking obnoxious in the whole, oh, it's bad after, it's stupid after the Duel Monsters. And it's like, it was stupid from day one. It's all stupid all the way. And I'm just gonna clarify this now. When I'm saying Yu-Gi Boomer in regards to Actman, I do not mean the Gen 1er equivalent. I do not believe him to be a Gen 1er Yu-Gi Boomer equivalence. I think he's a Yu-Gi boomer and that he only liked DM, and that's fine. It is perfectly fine if the only region you liked in Pokemon and the only games you liked were Kanto, or if the only version of Yu-Gi-Oh that you enjoyed was the original anime and the original core sets before the new summoning mechanics. That's a perfectly valid opinion. I just need to make that clear. You just need to learn to shut the fuck up about it if you don't care for the newer stuff. Okay, there's a lesson to all this. It's be a dude, not a dick. That's the core tenet that you should be living by. Tenet, of course, being a reference to the Christopher Nolan film that was released that I still don't really care for and was quite honestly the film students movie of just like pretentious gatekeeping assholes telling me that I'm too stupid to get it. And maybe I am. I'll concede that point. Maybe I'm just an idiot who doesn't understand it. But that doesn't mean that it's good. Anyways, moving on. The Yugi Boomer video here. He is pretty clearly just a fan of the OG DM era of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's cool. I respect it, and he's respectful of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is quite clear if you've watched his video, which I do recommend. Now, it is a Yugi Boomer video, so it's got all the type of things we would expect from it, namely...
So I draw 2 cards!
What does Pot of Greed do again?
The Pot of Greed joke.
Card games on motorcycles.
Pendulum is bad and dumb and overly complicated. And it's got my personal favorite.
Unfortunately, no, I am not a virgin. I hope you can accept me into your ranks despite that.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Equals virgin. Now, I'm not gonna knock him for this. I fall back on this all the time. When people ask me about my Yu-Gi-Oh! Hobby and how many cards I own, I often tell them that I am in fact a level 12 permavirge, because it doesn't matter how much sex I do or do not have, it would be irrelevant because the number of cards that I own greatly eclipses the amount of sex that I've had. And as such, it doesn't matter even if I have sex twice a day for the rest of my life, I probably still won't beat the number of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards I'll end up having at the end of it all, and I'm still a virgin because of it. Hell, I even included this as a joke in like school projects that I did. It's not pizza boxes. I'd say pizza to you. No. No. It's Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, alright? Okay. All bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. Okay, I have a few. Think I just got back my virginity. And I'll defend it with my life. You see? It's not the greatest joke in the world, but it hits. It's fine. It's not, I can't call him out for it. I do it myself. It's just, you know, it is the entry-level comedy of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which is fine because this video is really as much for Yu-Gi-Oh! Players as it is Yu-Gi-Oh! Nostalgia people or people who aren't really aware of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a wide market video, so to say. It covers all branches of interest in it. It's just talking about one of his hobbies from back in the day, or even currently. And honestly, this is completely irrelevant, but I need to know, is this a big collection? I don't mean to say this to be a tool. My perspective is skewed. I have tried to fit this in 3 different videos, so I'm just gonna play the showing of my collection. Understand this is not bragging or me trying to boast, I just have a lot of cards. Okay, we got this fat stack. Those things I haven't even opened yet, fuck them, I don't know. I think that's sorted just loose junk. We got a couple deck boxes down here. As you can see from the... As you can see, we got a few. So we got like the remnants of an old Draco Pal deck. And these ones aren't all full deck boxes. Some of these are a little more empty than others, but most of them are about on that level. So we have a couple of deck boxes in this box we keep down here. And these are the retired ones. We don't talk, we'll get to next week. So then we come into here, into the desk, and you can see we got a couple more deck boxes. These ones are a little more, it's a fucking mess in there, good God. There's a couple more. These ones are more complete. These are more ready to go. These ones are decks that I'm tinkering with. And if you didn't get from I have a lot of deck boxes, so I just do the green tape technique. And then underneath that we have the good cards. So I've got the boxes of cards with the tape, and then they're all about full. The Dual Devastator box isn't full because this was a good product, by the way, if you didn't buy it. But it's, so these are just like the cards that are good, that might be good in meta decks or whatever, and then you'll hate me because they're all unsleeved like a heathen, but they're all sorted. You know what I mean? Like, what even is that card? What even is that? That's Dark Hole. Cool. So we got all our copies of Dark Hole here, and then it's like, I want Mystical Space Typhoon. Well, you're getting Scapegoat, idiot, and every copy of Scapegoat that you have, and set rotation, and MST, and MST, and it's like, cool. So it's all sorted and good to go, and I keep those there for when I'm like, hey, I need shit for all my decks up here. I'll just go into the boxes down here. Okay, Okay, these don't count because this whole stack's just Digimon cards. It actually doesn't count. This is sleeved at least, by the way. But we all have our little pile of cards next on the desk that doesn't count, right? And so these are a little unsorted. We got that one's not too bad. This one's a little full. I don't know what those are. Oh. Okay, so that's a Digimon deck. That one doesn't count. That's a Tenyi deck. I need to put in a deck box. Oh, jeez. Okay, and then we come over here, and then there's actually God Left Us to Die in the form of whatever this is. If you want an explanation for this, stick around to the end, and until then, yep. Okay, and then those don't count. I don't know what deck that is, but it's sitting there. I don't know. The tins are empty. Again, more deck boxes. These are like the in-betweeners. They're not going in the retirement box yet. The goodie bag, which is the decks that I'm currently like going for and playing, and I bring with me and use with some regularity. And these are 4 decks. These are the big old boxes. And then there's a little bit of like duplicates, and like that's a Digimon deck. It doesn't count, but buried. But you got the boxes that I don't mind the boost. You got the boxes of cards, and this one's kind of cheating because it's the most full. But each of them has at least 3 in it, so I have too many fucking cards. See what I mean? I feel like that was more than his collection is, maybe not significantly more. I don't know. My scaling is skewed because my friends all have like 1 or 2 tins each, and I've got 5, locals boxes of bulk sitting around. So mine is a slight bit larger than my friend's collection, and then the only other scale I have is like Ruxin's, which is, I don't know, a warehouse probably. So please inform me, like, how big is your collection, and is his collection like a big collection? I suppose it depends. How many cards are actually in those legendary collection boxes there, Mr. Ackman? How many cards are in the shoe boxes? Is the Merrick deck in the Merrick deck box, or have you just kept it because it's got Merrick on it? I'm not judging. I just want to fucking know. A large part of this video is tied at the hip, really, to the Yu-Gi-Oh anime.
Now, you can't talk about the game without mentioning the anime.
Now that's fair. The Yu-Gi-Oh anime and the Yu-Gi-Oh card game are pretty much symbiotic. It's a commercial for the card game, and the card game that you play makes you want to watch the cool hype anime moments. That's perfectly understandable, but it does definitely skew the nostalgia glasses of Yu-Gi boomers, whether they Gen 1er boomers or just boomer boomers, because so many people only remember Playground Yu-Gi-Oh, and Playground Yu-Gi-Oh is absolutely nothing like the real game has ever been. It's just the nature of the beast. I think that is pretty clear in terms of the Actman's memory of it. It's a little more in between, I guess I'd say. It seems like his decks and whatnot have a strategy and are a little more advanced than just the Playground Yu-Gi-Oh was back in 03-ish. But still, it's definitely not the tiered constructed decks that you'd see in the competitive game. I do gotta give him props because it's clear that he's done his research in regards to making this video. He did reach out to many members of the community. You got Paul from Team APS, you have Farfa, you got Douglas Konami representative Zeef himself, and best of all is Slaydra. Slaydra is in this video, which is how I know he did research, because Slaydra has not been relevant in the Yu-Gi-Oh community at large since probably 2016 or so. The last thing I remember about Slaydra was that he changed his name from Asian Eyes White Dragon to Slaydra, and also that his channel went from like Yu-Gi-Oh content to just, I guess, variety gaming. I'm not knocking him, but just it wasn't for me. I stopped watching at that point in time. And the other thing is that
Yu-Gi-Oh is dying, and it's awful, and it's terrible, and this is why people don't play it, and also it takes no skill to win an event. It's all just luck these days.
Those were the Asian Eye videos. Whoops. Those were the Slaydra videos that I remembered, and I mean, I disagree with it, but, you know, Slaydra's in these videos, and that tells me he was at least, he didn't just go surface level. He didn't just go for the biggest names currently. He went for the community at large over the last however. So kudos to that act, man. I respect the effort that has clearly been put into this video in more ways than just one. Some other things about it.
Would you say the power creep has kind of evened out now?
I don't know, like, because we're currently in a format in the TCG where like power creep has gotten pretty out of hand.
I mean, I found it funny that power creep is most assuredly a feature of Yu-Gi-Oh!, a factor that has to be dealt with when playing it, especially over a number of years. It's just really funny to me that when he released this video, it's right as we're heading into Ishizu tier limits, which is like, God, I hope, the pinnacle of power creep right now. Yu-Gi-Oh! Power creep is like a sine function. Yes, I'm bringing math into this. They forced me to learn it in high school, and I'm gonna force you to fucking hear it because I'm getting my damn time's worth out of those math classes.
You dick!
The sine function, the ups and downs, it always happens over the course of years, or at the very least it always has. Dragon Ruler and Spellbook was an insane format. Power crept everything before it, and after that we got like hat format, which everyone has a fond nostalgia for, a large number of people who played it do, and it's pretty balanced, pretty diverse, pretty fair, and definitely below the power level that Spellbook Ruler format was. And then it was followed by Duelist Alliance, which was the upswing, and it led up to Pepe, and it was things were insane. This is the most broken the game has ever been. And then a year later, fucking Blue Eyes won Worlds because the decks got slaughtered and the power level went down to here, to that Blue Eyes Metal Foe format. And then we head up with Zoo, and it continues, it's eternal, that's Yu-Gi-Oh! And so if he had released this video a year ago, roundabout Dawn of Majesty format, right before Sword Soul, I think a number of people would have told you that power creep was in a pretty healthy spot. Sure, Drytron was obnoxious, but there's always one obnoxious deck. Tri-Brigade was heralded as one of the best, if not the best decks, and also one of the most fair good decks that we've had in a while. But of course, the way the world is, this video is released as we head into Mama format. Magnificent Mavens with those Ishizus. Is that offensive? With those Ishizu cards. Broadly, Yu-Gi-Oh! I think is known for two things outside of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community, the anime, and then also pendulum overcomplication, and that everything's crazy overpowered and the pendulum cards are stupid, weird, crazy, complicated, dumb. And those are the two most outward things. So of course, as we head into this video, if you aren't a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player and you watch it and you ask, you know, is power creep at a good point? No, really not. But just kind of unfortunate, you know, a year earlier, people probably would have said, yeah, we're at a healthy point. Maybe in a year from now, when Ishizu tiers are dead in the ground, like I praise to God, I hope they will, maybe it'll be better then. Who knows? There's a few other funny things that happened in the video that I liked.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Has gotten to a point where so much shit is happening, you can end up having 15-minute long turns, where someone goes through half of their deck, has 10 cards in the graveyard, and like 8 cards in their hand, 5 monsters on the field on the first turn. And they all have effects that negate other effects, so your opponent is basically locked out of playing, which is the most unfun thing that can happen in Yu-Gi-Oh!
First, there's the fair complaint that 20-minute turns, opening turns, and crazy oppressive first turn boards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be very off-putting to a new player. 100% correct, I'm not arguing that. There definitely is a problem in introducing someone to Yu-Gi-Oh! Fresh, new, inexperienced, and plopping them into the middle of locals with even, say, Sword Soul, which compared to Ishizu tiers is insane, but you get my point. It can definitely be daunting. The funny thing is, it's a fair complaint to say that modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks don't let you play. It's just he mentions the fact that he is a bad reaction to Samochi player.
One of my favorite decks is called Bad Reaction to Samochi. One of the cards I use is Gravity Bind, which prevents monsters level 4 or higher from attacking.
Which is a deck that, according to him, he uses Gravity Bind to make it so the opponent can't attack and can't meaningfully play, and then burn them for game. Because, of course, in every aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the core strategy is on some level to not let the opponent play so you can win. Since 2004, people have been playing Jinzo at a casual level because of the anime, and at a good level because it's just a great card in the game at that time. And regardless on which level you're playing at, you're shutting off traps by playing Jinzo. Even the Yugi boomers have an appeal toward the floodgate because that's just kind of Yu-Gi-Oh! At its worst, it is unbearable, but even at its more tame, it's still there. It's just funny to me that there's complaints about not letting them play, and then he wants to play probably the worst deck to play against. Burn. Stun. Oh, I love it. Naturally, there's only one reaction that anyone has to floodgates. Are you bored? Why not play some Yu-Gi-Oh? It's a fun game. Come on in and activate some cards. Declare an attack. What's that? You're going to activate Gravity Bind instead? Really now? I think you have the audacity to activate a floodgate. You will regret that decision. I think that's the pretty authentic reaction to floodgates, okay? God, I fucking hate those cards. And again, I've mentioned it, but he has some pretty fair complaints. Some of them I agree with wholeheartedly, some of them I have a different take on, but it is what it is. Take, for example, he mentions when talking about Gravity Bind that it's stupid that Gravity Bind can't affect Xyz or Link monsters because they have ranks and links and not levels.
It makes the card far less useful in a modern format. Because Gravity Bind wasn't created with the idea that monsters would at some point just not have levels.
He finds that that's an annoying complication. Me personally, I kind of like that. I like that there is a built-in workaround to cards that the game had that were otherwise very strong that you can, work around in deck building and whatnot. Yeah, you can't get through with all your monsters, but if you can make an Xyz, you can maybe start doing some pokes at the opponent, so you're not just completely locked out of attacking by the opponent's floodgate and hoping to draw the out. I think that adds another element of gameplay that, for me, benefits it. Granted, I don't deal with Gravity Bind in the modern day. I haven't seen that card flipped on me in probably a decade at the earliest, but still, I personally like that element of diversity. Another thing he complains about is the fact that links can't go into defense position.
Link monsters can't change their battle positions for any reason.
Which for a long time I was 100% on board with, until someone pointed out the obvious of when you turn a monster to defense position, do you turn the card to the left or to the right? Because when it comes to link monsters, that is everything. A link monster's value is largely placed on its arrows. A card with good arrows is way better than a card with decent arrows, which is better than a card that doesn't see play because of its bad arrows, because the bad link arrows make it undesirable completely. This is a factor of link monsters from day one, and especially in Master Rule 4, where most of them were developed, at least as I make this video. And again, turning the monster left or right greatly impacts that, so it kind of removes that layer of design to the link monster to make it fixable by having it turn one way and become playable. A way you could argue to work around that is to state that when you turn a monster to defense, you always have to turn it so the text of the name is on the left or on the right of the card, but now you're enforcing the way people turn a card in a card game, which on the grand scheme outside of an automated simulator is the stupidest piece of design you could implement into a game. It would be astronomically dumb for them to mandate that cards turn left or right specifically for defense position, because that's going to be abused and misunderstood just about everywhere, because it's not something that should ever matter. And if you Book of Moon a link monster, then you get the well, is the arrow still there or not? And honestly, probably it wouldn't be, but it's still a necessary level of complication that the game doesn't need, because everyone can agree there is already too great a layer of complication in Yu-Gi-Oh! And then the last one he mentions in this little tidbit is about non-targeting.
If you select a monster with an effect, but your effect doesn't include the word target, then it's not technically targeting and the effect still goes through.
Now, non-targeting is again something I'm a little fond of. This might be Stockholm Syndrome talking, but again, I like that extra layer of complexity to it, and that extra layer of, oh, so I do have means to out a card I might not otherwise. Avramax is a son of a bitch unless you're playing Medulce. That's a neat little faucet. Maybe my boss monster that I just thunk on and be like, I don't have to think today, I've got Avramax. And then my opponent makes a Cupcake Queen, and all of a sudden I'm losing. I like that I don't just have a guaranteed win by playing the strongest natural card. Again, I can understand why this is not fond if you aren't accustomed to the game and you're like, exactly what he says. You've selected the card, why isn't that targeting? And just the nature of the game. It's the unfortunate reality for some, and it's the benefit of one MBT for others, because really a law degree significantly helps your ability to understand Yu-Gi-Oh! One pointless thing that comes up in the video when he's talking about how overly complicated new cards are is that he features a fake one.
For some reason, every card has to do 4 different things.
It's not important at all. It does not impact his argument in the slightest. I believe his points still stand from it. I just find it funny that he features this random fake fusion monster, which admittedly looks super cool, and I'd probably play it for that reason alone, but it's it's funny that a fake one made it through to the final cut, because modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards are so insane that some of the fake ones just blend right in. Another point he goes over that I find some contention with is the existence of archetypes.
We went from menacing insects and hordes of zombies to cars? An archetype on cars?
Again, this is an area I disagree with him on, but I do understand his frustration at his point. His argument that when you open a new pack and none of the archetypes appeal to you, it is a deterrent from wanting to buy new packs. I personally didn't buy Battle of Chaos because none of the archetypes in the set appealed to me. I just figured I'd buy some of the singles that I liked and move on with my day. If you weren't on my level of, or the level of going and looking to research the exact cards in the set and valuing it, and you just want to go buy the pack that looks cool as a more casual fan, it's definitely a deterrent. My counterpoint is that typically archetype gameplay has led to more interesting formats and
history of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Than non-archetype formats have. GOAT format is admittedly something I'm not super duper familiar with, so correct me where I'm wrong here, because I'll certainly be wrong in some regard. I know there are like 2-ish or 3 decks that are varying degrees of viability beyond the obvious GOAT control that is what the format is named after. I think, you know, Warrior Beat and Burn Strategy, but it's pretty definitively GOAT. GOAT control is the deck of GOAT format, hence the name of the format. And even still, there are so many cards across GOAT format that are present in each of the decks. Doesn't matter which variant you're playing, Graceful Charity, Pot of Greed, these sorts of things are going to end up in every single deck. GOAT format, from my limited experience of it, when it comes to GOAT control at least, is that you're playing like 30 to 35 cards that are the same as what your opponent's playing. And then you got like 5-ish, you know, tech slots, so to say. Again, I could be very wrong here. Let me know. I'm not a GOAT connoisseur in either the Yu-Gi-Oh card game or in terms of eating goats. It's just not in my, it's not in my diet. Still, I think my point that you can get is that it's the best 40 cards. It's just the 40 best cards available, and that's what you play with. Whereas when you get to archetypes, yeah, it's pretty fair. If you don't give a shit about Sylvan, you don't want to play Sylvan. But when you're looking at these archetypes, it offers a lot more room for uniquely broken cards. With Sylvan as the example, they have Sylvan Charity. There is a deck with a Graceful Charity, you know, equivalent that you can go and play at 3. It's a draw 3 card in Yu-Gi-Oh! And you can play it. That's nuts. A lot of decks would care for that. Even if they still had to put 2 more back onto the deck and it didn't synergize with the core strategy, just digging 3 cards in to get better cards is crazy good. Saryuya is an example of why that can be abused, and Sylvan have 3 of that thing in archetype. And only Sylvan gets to play it. Or, you know, pick another thing with a broken example. Tiramisu, I mentioned earlier, has the 2 non-targeted spins back into the deck. Possibly the strongest removal in the entirety of the game, the non-targeting spin into the deck. And Medolce can abuse it with the greatest of ease. But Sylvan can't abuse Tiramisu, and Medolce can't abuse Sylvan Charity. And so it allows for Konami to be able to design uniquely broken things that are contained in an archetype, and then allow for a variety of decks. Now, granted, you've still got generic cards, you've still got the best deck, and you've still got, you know, varying tiers and formats and elements of brokenness to it all, but because the archetypes allow for unique gimmicks, like artifacts setting themselves as monsters, I think it allows for a much more diverse gameplay than if it had continued to be non-archetypal and everyone's just playing the 40 best cards you can be playing in Yu-Gi-Oh! And the existence of archetypes doesn't even exclude that thing from happening, because in the midst of all of Yu-Gi-Oh's histories, you can find various decks that are essentially good stuff piles that do well. Synchro Cat was one. Rescue Rabbit's another. Hat format is named after an amalgamation deck of just 3 good engines and then some good stuff traps. And even more recently, Adventure Piles were 60 card piles of decks with just various engines that were good to make good, strong boards. There's still crazy mutt decks from time to time that are playing a wide variety of cards that can compete with Archetypes. So the Archetypes don't exclude that sort of deck building, and they haven't even stopped that from being competitively relevant. They're just more diversity to it. That's my take on Archetypes. You can let me know if you disagree in the comments, but I felt like sharing that. And off of that topic, I just want to say it's hilarious to me that boomers,
We got a boomer!
Yugi boomers hate pendulums. Now this is fair because when looking at all the summoning mechanics, pendulum is definitely the most complicated. It changes the game far more than arguably even Lynx did in terms of having to learn it, where you get people asking, does the scale matter if it's the high scale on left or right? And, going to the face-up extra deck instead of the graveyard. So how does that interact with cards that have to send to graveyard and? There's a lot more to learn to it than just every other summoning type. So I can understand the confusion and the disdain from learning such a complicated mechanic compared to, say, Xyz or Synchros. Where I find the comedy in it is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the last 4 years, pendulum decks have been the most reminiscent of GOAT format style building of decks, because it's not been a clear, definitive best pendulum archetype in my mind. It's always just been the 40 card pendulum good stuff mutts. Sure, Endymion inevitably shows up because Endymion's just a good card, and the Pendulum Magicians are very good, so they're seen as well. And, you've got your reoccurring things, but it's just for years been just what's the best pendulum wah that has synergy with the pendulum wah, and then we throw it into a 40 card pile and call it a deck. And that is very reminiscent of GOAT format building in my eyes, but it's pendulum, so no Yugi Boomer is going to take the time to look at it. And that is an extra layer of comedy to me. And speaking of Endymion, this is a segue, but the video features a point wherein they talk about some of the more iconic monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! They go over the predictable ones, your Blue Eyes, your Red Eyes, Dark Magicians, and Exodias, and even, BLS, Monarch, Spirit Reaper, some more iconic competitive cards from back in the day are brought up. But nobody brings up what a modern iconic card would be, and I'm gonna maybe make a hot take. I don't think so. I think this is pretty lukewarm. I think Endymion is the most iconic modern Yu-Gi-Oh card. Not because of its relevance in the game competitively, but because of its relevance as the Yu-Gi-Oh card that's brought up every time Yu-Gi-Oh is brought up in a non-Yu-Gi-Oh thing. If I see Yu-Gi-Oh being talked about on Twitter from people who aren't invested in Yu-Gi-Oh, if I see a video where it's non-Yu-Gi-Oh player looks at Yu-Gi-Oh cards, if I see someone talking about Yu-Gi-Oh at all and they aren't invested into it as a card game, Endymion shows up because it is the most absurd example of a pendulum card. It's everywhere. This is my claim as the most iconic modern Yu-Gi-Oh card. I can't name a single other card from a single other deck that is as relevant outside of the community as fucking Endymion is. And that's my claim for this video. Oh, what's some other stuff he mentions in the video that I can ramble about? He brings up Cleafort because he doesn't care for Cle as a deck, which is fair and correct because Cle as a deck was fucking horrible to play against in 2014. However, Cleafort Scout's German name is Cleafort Kundschafter, which is quite possibly the best Yu-Gi-Oh card name ever. And I've been saying that as the name of me getting fucked over for about 8 years now. If I'm ever dealing with something that is going awry in my personal life, I will say out loud, I'm getting the Cleafort Kundschaft, or the Cleafort Kundschafter. I've been Cleafort Kundschafted, because it's just a great fucking word. And if you are playing Cleafort, I do recommend you pick up 3 copies of German Scout for that exact explicit reason. Some other things he brings up in the video, he mentions Yu-Gi-Oh's lack of a resource system being a problem.
There is no limit to the number of monsters you can summon, cards you can search from your deck, cards you can get back from your graveyard to your hand, or cards that you can fusion and special summon and do all this crazy shit.
For which he is 100% in the right. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not a card game that has a resource pool like mana and Magic, energy in Pokemon, and as a shill for the Digimon TCG, the memory gauge in Digimon. Fucking love that game. Still, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is unique in card games for not having that. It is apparent that it doesn't have it. It is sometimes very problematic that it doesn't have it, and just about in every other instance, it's fun as hell that it doesn't have it. My one takeaway from this is that it is a problem for Yu-Gi-Oh! And in Yu-Gi-Oh! That we don't have a mana or cost system, but that's what makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! If you want a card game with a balanced sense of resourcing and managing those resources and keeping some to be used on the opponent's turn versus using it all on your turn to get your setups and this and that, that is a very fair and another layer of strategy that Yu-Gi-Oh! Can't offer you, but there are plenty of games that have that. Pokemon and Magic are two of the biggest. Pokemon especially is very easy to pick up and play, and Magic is not all that complicated. I can only say so much. I'm not a Magic player. Please, MTG fans, don't shoot me. Still, those are all great and fun, but only Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the one I know of that lets me use every card in my deck turn 1 if I can get to every card in my deck turn 1. That is, again, a struggle at times. It leads to some horrible things. It leads to some 8-day or more combos that involve calling every single card in the game to literally lock your opponent out of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Entirely. That is absurd, but it's Yu-Gi-Oh! That's why we love it. I don't know anyone who's like, I hate that there's no resource system and that I can play my cards. Man, does that piss me off. Because if it does, you're not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And that, that's fair, whatever, you do you. But it is a glory to Yu-Gi-Oh! That we get to just go ham wild with this shit. I'll say it again. It's sometimes bad, but it's almost always at least still fun. The other thing he mentions that is 100% correct is he brings up the complication of learning Yu-Gi-Oh!
Look at the official beginner's guide for Yu-Gi-Oh! It's 30 pages long.
A point I am 100% on his side for. Teaching someone Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a bit of a task, certainly compared to some other card games. Pokemon, I often forget how to play because I play it once every 2 or 3 years, and every time I do forget, it's a simple flip through the book and hey, look at that, I can play again. It's not really anything hyper complex. Yu-Gi-Oh! On the other hand, I have tried to teach to 2 people. One successfully, one unsuccessfully so far. First person, we taught him back in 2016, pre-Lynx but post-Pendulum. To teach him, we gave him Baby's First deck, which if you aren't aware is simply Satellar Knight, a deck so brain dead, even a baby could play it. The tellers summon tellers or search tellers or occasionally foolish a teller, and that's really it. And then once you've got 2 4s on board, make it Xyz. World's your oyster. He kept making Diamond Crab King. It was very confusing, but very entertaining. While doing that, I played against him with Blackwing, and I played a very dumbed down Blackwing where I wouldn't do anything crazy and push for game. If I had to, I would simply make a synchro or 2, break his board, and explain to him, yeah, this one's a tuner, this one's a non-tuner, so I can use them to make a synchro. And that's it. I just played a very simple Blackwing against a very simple Satellar Knight, and once he got comfortable enough with Xyz and synchros, having watched them, we then branched on into Pendulum and other sorts of things. But it was a process. It was a learning experience. It was not simply pick up and play, which a lot of people, when wanting to play a game, wish to pick up and play it. This isn't the classic case of I'm skipping the tutorial and this game sucks, how do you play it? It's the case of the tutorial is incredibly long and it's a lot of reading and I'm very much disinterested in learning right now, which is a fair complaint. My other friend was drunk. Full stop. We were trying to teach him Dino Rabbit and he was far too inebriated to learn. And we were far too inebriated to teach, but that's besides the point. Even had he been sober, it's a very much a learning experience. And Dino Rabbit, hilariously, is probably too much to teach someone. It's a simple combo: summon Bunny, make dinosaurs, turn 2, tour guide, summon Leviair, summon Bunny, summon dinosaurs. But if you don't know what I'm saying, you may as well just be having a stroke because none of that sentence made sense outside of Yu-Gi-Oh! Seriously, look at it. Look at that sentence. Look at it and tell me that that is an authentic human form of communication. It's not. And the last thing I really want to cover that he goes over is sort of what I covered at the beginning. He is not a Gen 1er. He is just a fan of old Yu-Gi-Oh!
It'd be naive to think that Duel Monsters would be the exact same game for 20 years. Not many card games stay relevant without innovation. Whatever painful choices Konami had to make, well, it's kept the game alive. And I'd rather people be able to play and enjoy new Yu-Gi-Oh! Than not at all, because I can still play with the cool cards.
He makes it abundantly clear in the video that he's not a fan of some of the more crazy things. The bit about DDD Super Doom King Purple Armageddon and the obnoxiousness of writing out that it has a once per turn clause is both funny and on point. Yu-Gi-Oh! Could definitely use some keywords, and while he doesn't say that specifically, the point he makes I agree with completely. And even better than that is that there are multiple points in the video where he states that even though he's not a fan of Pendulum, and even though he's not a fan of all the crazy new stuff that you can do and all the cards and summoning mechanics and how there's too many of them, that doesn't matter because he can still play the game that he loves, which is older Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is by far the most important thing to me, and also the thing I respect the most, because it's very easy to look at new Yu-Gi-Oh! And just be like, stupid, overcomplicated, dumb, I don't like it, who gives a shit. You can probably farm a lot of like easy likes, so to say, and a lot of people being like, yep, I agree in the comments if you just take that stance. I almost don't blame people for it because it's the easiest and low-hangingest of the fruit takes you can take, but I really respect him for just being like, you know what, it's not for me, but that doesn't mean it's, you know, bad. Sure, he's critical of it, but it comes from a place of passion. You can tell he likes playing the card game. You can tell from the collection he has that he likes playing the card game and he finds it cool, and he says outright, I can just play what I like, and it's better that people can enjoy a Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not a fan of than have it be done with completely, which is an incredibly mature take and one I respect the hell out of. Is that really important? No. Who gives a shit whether or not I respect the Act-Man's video? But I do, and I'm gonna say it because, honestly, kudos. It shows that he has a passion for the game, he really does like it, he wants what's best for it, and he's willing to concede that even though he isn't a fan of everything, it's still, you know, it's a good game. It's a fucked game, but it's a good game. And I really respect and appreciate that from him. I'm gonna say it a third time. Was that a fourth time? Who knows? I'm just reiterating that point. There really isn't a critique he has of the game that I like vehemently am just opposed to and disagree with, or at the very least, it's an opinion one that I can be like, yeah, you know what, it's a fair opinion to have. Regardless of whether or not I agree with it, I don't think he's wrong for having his take on the game. And I really enjoyed the video, honestly. Sure, there was too much pot of greed jokes for maybe my liking specifically, but it wasn't made for me, it was made to be entertaining, and without a doubt it was. He's clearly passionate about the game, he clearly put effort into understanding the game at large. There's gonna be a part 2, which I probably won't do this react type video to, but either way, I really recommend you check it out, and thank you Act-Man for giving me another video to put out, hoorah. This video is sponsored by Dick Suck Nation. Thank you for watching. I don't have an outro to this. This video is done now, goodbye. I'm having a fucking stroke. Clifford Kunschafter.